Hey everyone, there have been 3 new MCU movies that have come out since my last update, so I figured now's as good a time as any for another one. As I've said before, I don't think any of these movies are necessarily bad, some of them are just better than others. As always, spoiler alert. Starting off way down at the bottom, my number 27 is Thor: The Dark World. If this is the MCU's bottom of the barrel, then I'd say it has a pretty good average, because it could be a lot worse. The acting is solid, but the characters don't really get much development, and Malekith is one of the worst MCU villains, if not the worst. The one place where this movie kind of improves on the first Thor is the cinematography. It's not spectacular or anything, but it doesn't overuse Dutch angles, so that's something.
You know, with all that power, I thought you'd head harder.
The writing isn't the best, but there are plenty of memorable and funny bits, like Thor riding the subway, or when he whacks Malekith while they're in the air. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 26 is Iron Man 2. Look, there was no way Jon Favreau could ever make this movie live up to the original, and I think he knew that, so instead of trying to do that, he just decided to do something different instead. Instead of being a big action-filled superhero flick, it's more of a character study with 2 big action set pieces and a couple smaller fights mixed in. Tony Stark gets just as much character development here as he did in the first Iron Man, if not more. Black Widow gets introduced in a very badass way, and even Happy gets a moment to shine.
I got him!
Whiplash isn't a top-tier MCU villain, but the conflict works because his goals are in direct conflict with Tony's. The action scenes we get are very well done, and I actually appreciate that the final fight against Whiplash is short and sweet, because we just got through a big action set piece, and to have another one immediately after that would be overkill. It's all about pacing, and Justin Hammer is one of the most underrated villains in the MCU. My score is 3.25 out of 5. Alright, please don't hate me for this. My number 25 is Captain America: The First Avenger. I like this movie a lot, but it might be the most overrated film in the MCU. It's not bad by any means, it's just nowhere near as good as the other Captain America movies. There are honestly times when it feels like it's just a setup for the Avengers. The acting is solid, but most of the characters don't really get much development. The only way that Steve really changes throughout the movie is physically.
Jan? Jan?
Wil.
Mr. Stark?
The action is good and the musical score is great. Red Skull is a pretty two-dimensional villain, but Hugo Weaving's performance helps him stand out, and Joe Johnston's direction helps this movie stand out. My score is 3.3 out of 5. Number 24 is Thor. This is a pretty solid origin story in spite of Kenneth Branagh's overuse of Dutch angles. Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston are both great, and Natalie Portman and Anthony Hopkins are both good.
Thor, Odin's son, you have betrayed the express command of your king Through your arrogance and stupidity, you've opened these peaceful realms and innocent lives to the horror and desolation of war! You are unworthy of these realms, unworthy of your title! You're unworthy of the loved ones you have betrayed. I now take from you your power in the name of my father and his father before. I own it all, father! Cut you off!
I honestly think that Loki is a better villain here than he was in the Avengers. The action is pretty good, the musical score is solid, and the comedy mostly works, especially the bit where Thor asks for a horse, and then asks for something even more ridiculous. The score is 3.4 out of 5. Number 23 is The Incredible Hulk. This is definitely an underrated one. I appreciate that it's not an origin story. Instead, they established that something resembling the events of the 2003 Hulk movie happened prior to the events of this film. This movie gives us one of the best portrayals of Hulk, specifically how scary he can be. The only other MCU movie to come close to that is Age of Ultron, but that's mostly just for like a couple scenes. Edward Norton is great, and Tim Roth is much better than he gets credit for. Abomination isn't a top-tier villain, and the CG used for him and Hulk isn't the best, but he works because he was established as a character before he became a monster. I apologize in advance if I butcher this or any other names. Louis Leterrier's personal directing style really helps this movie stand out from the bunch, and the action scenes are much better than they get credit for.
Where are the 50 cals? Move your asses!
Score is 3.5 out of 5. Number 22 is Captain Marvel. Honestly, my only big problem with this movie is the plot. It's not that it's bad per se, it's just generic. That being said, I'll take a generic story done well over an original story done poorly 9 times out of 10. Brie Larson kills it as Captain Marvel. Yes, there are moments when she comes off as bland and emotionless. The mistake is thinking that this is an accident, or not supposed to happen, when it's actually deliberate. She's been taught by the Kree that emotions are weakness and they should be suppressed at all times. And even when she starts to reject their teachings, she's still not sure who she can trust, so she's not ready to open up yet. The acting is pretty solid across the board, but the biggest surprise came from Ben Mendelsohn, and here's why. Ben Mendelsohn has kind of become typecast as the sleazy villain. Dark Knight Rises, Rogue One, Ready Player One, that shitty Robin Hood reboot, you get the idea. As soon as he popped up in this movie, I figured, oh, yep, he's the bad guy. I mean, yeah, I knew the Kree weren't exactly going to be the heroes, but doesn't mean you can't have 2 villains. And even after it was revealed that he's not evil, I was still expecting a heel turn right up until the credits rolled, because that's what I'm used to seeing from him. So, good on him for breaking typecast. The music is good, the action is great, and I will never not love this moment of Carol taking all of her past defeats and remembering that they were actually victories, because no matter how many times she gets knocked down, she always gets back up.
You're right. I'm only human.
On Hala, you were reborn.
Veers.
The score is 3.6 out of 5. Number 21 is Iron Man 3. I haven't read a lot of comics, and when this movie first came out, I pretty much hadn't read any. At least not that I can remember. That's probably why I actually really like the twist. I mean, that and the fact that it's actually a really funny reveal. Seriously, Ben Kingsley kills it even more as Trevor than he did as the fake Mandarin. Now that I know about the comic Mandarin, and now that we've gotten him in the MCU, I still think Shane Black and everyone behind this movie made the right choice, and here's why. Out of all the movies in the MCU, and all the little series within it, like the Iron Man movies, the Captain America movies, the Thor movies, the Avengers movies, and so on and so forth, the Iron Man movies have always been the most grounded in reality. If you try to take someone who is legitimately just magic, like the Mandarin, and you put him in a movie that's supposed to be mostly grounded in reality, it's not gonna work. Okay, that's not fair. That's not to say it couldn't work, but it would be very, 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 very hard to make work. I'm not saying Aldrich Killian was a better villain than the actual Mandarin, because he's not. But he felt more at home in this movie series than the Mandarin would have. I hope that all made sense. Technical aspects are all on point. Cinematography, editing, lighting, costume design, all that. It says, one of my favorite portrayals of PTSD in a movie. I kind of wish they had done more with it in subsequent movies, but I'll take what I can get. Robert Downey Jr. is fucking awesome.
Aldrich Killian? What are you checking up on me?
Happy was concerned.
No, you're spying on me. I'm going to bed.
Hold on. Come on. Pep. Hey, I admit it. My fault. Sorry. I'm a piping hot mess. It's been going on for a while. I haven't said anything. Nothing's been the same since New York.
Oh, really? Well, I didn't notice that at all.
You experience things, and then they're over, and you still can't explain them. Gods, aliens, other dimensions. I'm just a man in a can. The only reason I haven't cracked up is probably because you moved in, which is great. I love you. I'm lucky. But honey, I can't sleep. You go to bed, I come down here. I do what I know. I tinker. Threat is imminent, and I have to protect the one thing that I can't live without. That's you. And my suits, they're
Machines.
they're part of me.
A distraction.
Maybe.
And also, I really like the final battle. I don't care what anyone says. My score is 3.75 out of 5. Number 20 is Black Widow. This isn't top tier Marvel, but it's a fun and emotionally charged superhero flick. The opening credits sequence is very underrated. Hard to have high stakes in a prequel, especially when you know the main character isn't going to die until later. Which is really why this movie should have come out after Civil War. But that's why it's important to have other characters that you care about and don't know what's going to happen to. This movie succeeds in that regard. Scarlett Johansson is solid as usual. And Florence Pugh, David Harbour, and Rachel Weisz are all great. The action is pretty great, the musical score is on point. and the emotional moments genuinely work. Taskmaster is a good villain. Not great, not awful, just good. I don't know much about Taskmaster from the comics. Obviously, this is a very different portrayal of the character, but I thought it was fine. And it worked within the context of the story. My score is 3.8 out of 5. Number 19 is Izzy Turtles. This movie is not perfect, but it's an ambitious and surprisingly character-driven superhero movie from a director who knows exactly what she's doing. The main cast is all solid. Barry Keoghan, Lauren Ridloff, Kumail Nanjiani, Angelina Jolie, and Gemma Chan, I'd say are a step above the others, but everyone is good if not great. Everyone gets their moments to shine, and Keoghan and Ridloff have fantastic chemistry. That being said, Haraya Patel absolutely steals the show. He is delightful. Bill Skarsgård is solid, but he feels overqualified. He feels wasted in his role because he doesn't really speak that much. It's mostly just physical acting, which is fine. He does really good in the role. He just feels overqualified, like I said. The plot jumps back and forth between past and present at logical points in the story instead of having it feel random, so that's nice. The action is great, and it never uses too much CGI.
Druig's gone. It's over. Enough.
The music is solid and the cinematography and editing are on point. I absolutely love the morality and the conflict that this movie explores. I love when Kingo's like, look, I agree with Icarus, but I refuse to hurt any of you for my beliefs. My favorite part of this movie is the fact that we're finally getting more disability representation in superhero movies. Makkari is a deaf speedster, and Lauren Ridloff absolutely sells every scene she's in. My score is 3.85 out of 5. Alright, if my ranking wasn't controversial already, it's about to be. Number 18 is The Avengers. I love this movie. It has some issues, but I still love it. The writing is solid, the action is great, the music is excellent.
Do not touch me again.
Then don't take my stuff.
You have no idea what you're dealing with.
Shakespeare in the Park?
Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?
This is beyond you, Metal Man. Loki will face Asgardian justice.
He gives up the cube, he's all yours. Until then, stay out of the way.
Tourist.
Okay.
Power at 400% capacity.
How about that?
The problem is, none of the characters get very much development in this movie. Tony's attempted sacrifice may have been prompted by Captain America saying he wouldn't lay down on the wire, but honestly, it was still pretty in character even without that. Loki is a great character, but he's a lot less interesting in this movie now that we know he was under mind control. And like some of the other movies in this franchise, the color palette is just kinda meh, and it's not helped by the subpar lighting. All that aside, this is still a solid movie. The pacing is good and the humor is consistently funny. My score is 3.9 out of 5. Number 17 is Avengers Age of Ultron. I know, I don't give a fuck. I think the main reason this movie gets a lot of the hate it does is because the first Avengers set the bar really high, so anything short of cinematic perfection would be considered disappointment. There are a few reasons I prefer Age of Ultron over the Avengers. For one, the characters get much more development. Like, they got some development in the Avengers, but not enough. not nearly enough. This movie actually develops them more as characters and continues their long-term arcs down logical paths.
Sorry for barging in on you.
Yeah, we would have called ahead, but we were busy having no idea that you existed.
Yeah, well, Fury helped me set this up when I joined. Kept it off S.H.I.E.L.D.'s files, like to keep it that way. I figure it's a good place to lay low.
Honey. Oh, I missed you. How's little Natasha?
She's... Nathaniel.
Traitor.
As a character, Ultron is not as great as Loki, but as a villain, he is better in this movie than Loki was in the Avengers. The action is great, the lighting is much better, and the musical score is on point.
I'm on a mission.
What mission?
Peace in our time.
And yes, they do go a little overboard with the quippy humor, but it's fine. It's whatever. The score is 3.95 out of 5. Number 16 is AntMan. Guaranteed this movie would have a higher ranking if Edgar Wright had directed it, but whatever. This is a fairly standard origin story, but it has enough style and substance to work. Paul Rudd is a national treasure, I will hear nothing to the contrary. Evangeline Lilly is awesome, and Michael Pena is hilarious. The action is awesome, the writing is good.
Located the breach, bringing him in.
Sorry about this.
What the hell are you doing?
Breach is an adult male who has some sort of shrinking tech.
Sorry. Look, I'm sorry about this. Sorry.
That's enough!
And Louis' recap session is just absolutely the highlight of the film. Yellow Jacket is fine. Not bad. Not super memorable. Corey Stoll's performance helps him not suck. A score is 4 out of 5. Number 15 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. Some MCU movies are integral to advancing the main plot of the Infinity Saga. Others just play a small role and mostly just exist as self-contained entertainment. This movie is the latter. Ghost is one of the most underrated and I would argue the most sympathetic villain in the MCU. This is a fairly lighthearted and fun superhero movie. And the main villain's motivation is, I'm in pain every second of every day and I just want it to stop.
They were colleagues at S.H.I.E.L.D. Quantum research. Until my father dared disagree with the great Hank Pym, who had him fired. Oh, and discredited for good measure. My father tried to continue his research on his own. Desperate to restore his name, so he took risks. Too many. Until something went wrong. He told us to run.
Guys, what's happening? Just go! Go!
I could tell he was scared. I didn't want him to be alone. When I woke up, my parents were dead. I wasn't so lucky. They call it molecular disequilibrium. A rather dull name, I think. Doesn't quite do justice to what it means. Every cell in my body is torn apart and stitched back together. Over and over, every day.
She's not evil, she's only a villain because her goals are in direct conflict with the hero's goals. As far as they all know, there's not really a way for everyone to get what they want. Now, it eventually turns out that there is, but they don't know that. And for those of you who like having a character who's fun to hate, they also have a more straightforward villain in the form of Walton Goggins. The humor is just as good as it was in the first movie, and the story is pretty character-driven, which is nice. Best of all, this movie gives us a positive portrayal of co-parenting and shows us a divorced couple who aren't constantly at each other's throats, which is something not nearly enough movies do, so thank you for that. My score is 4.1 out of 5. Number 14 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. The only problem I have with this movie that's worth mentioning is that some of the jokes feel kind of forced. Other than that, it just kind of doesn't really live up to the first movie as a whole. It's still pretty great, though. The acting is solid across the board, and the characters get plenty of development. For the most part, the humor is on par with the first movie, and Drax gets some of the funniest moments this time around.
I am Mantis.
What are you doing?
Smiling. I hear it is the thing to do to make people like you.
What if you do it like that?
Oh. I was raised alone on Ego's planet. I do not understand the intricacies of social interaction. Can I pet your puppy? It is adorable.
Yes. That is called a practical joke.
I liked it very much.
I just made it up.
The pacing does get slow at times, but I didn't really mind. I was entertained. My score is 4.2 out of 5. Number 13 is Spider-Man Homecoming. This is definitely one of the most enjoyable MCU movies. Tom Holland is equally great as Peter and Spider-Man, Michael Keaton is awesome as Vulture, and Jacob Batalon is absolutely hilarious. The plot is mostly character-driven, the action is pretty great, the musical score is dope, and the humor is consistently funny. The final battle is fine, but I could have done without some of the quick cuts. Felt like they went a little overboard there. It does give us some great character moments, though, and the scene in the car on the way to the dance is just phenomenal.
Were you scared? I bet you were glad when your old pal Spider-Man showed up in the elevator, though.
Yeah, well, I actually didn't go up. I saw it off on the ground. Very lucky that he was there that day.
Good old Spider-Man.
Dad, light.
My score is 4.25 out of 5. Number 12 is Black Panther. Look, full disclosure, this movie did not deserve a Best Picture nomination. All the other nominations, yeah, absolutely. Best Picture? No. It's great, but it's not that great. R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman. That man was phenomenal as Black Panther. Killmonger is one of the best MCU villains, and Shuri is just fucking hilarious.
The entire suit sits within the teeth of the necklace. Strike it.
Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Not that hard, genius!
You told me to strike it. You didn't say how hard.
I invite you to my lab, and you just kick things around.
Well, maybe you should make it a little stronger. Hey, wait a minute.
The nanites absorb the kinetic energy and hold it in place for redistribution.
Very nice.
Strike it again in the same spot.
You're recording?
For research purposes.
Delete that footage.
Like some of the other movies, the plot is character-driven and it works. The action is awesome, especially the casino fight. The CGI during the final battle, not the best, but they were rushed. They were on a very tight deadline. They didn't have enough time to make it look convincing, so I'll cut them a little slack because I know what it's like to have to rush something. And finally, the musical score is one of the best in the MCU. The score is 4.3 out of 5. Number 11 is Avengers Endgame. This movie has the best third act in the entire MCU. The movie as a whole has some issues, but nothing major. Everyone's character development pays off here in some way, shape, or form. And their arcs help drive the plot. There are a ton of callbacks, but none of them feel forced. They all come about naturally.
We haven't met yet. I'm Clint.
I don't care.
Clint!
Give it to me.
The action is some of the best in the MCU. The acting is solid across the board.
Is that everyone?
But you wanted more?
Avengers!
Assemble.
There is one minor plot convenience early on, but I wouldn't really call it a convenience so much as an inevitability. The score is 4.4 out of 5. Number 10 is Doctor Strange. This is one of the best origin stories in the MCU.
Hoffman!
Yeah?
What are we gonna call this guy?
Dr. Octopus.
That's crap.
Science Squid?
Crap.
Doctor Strange.
That's pretty good. But it's taken.
The asshole's redemption is one of my favorite kinds of character arcs, and this movie does it better than most. Benedict Cumberbatch is great, and Tilda Swinton is fantastic. Yes, she's not exactly comic-accurate casting, but hey, they have a nice bait and switch, so that was fun. Honestly, though, I didn't really care. She is... I don't think I've ever seen her give a bad performance, and yeah, she really gets the character. The visuals are some of the best in the franchise, especially when the Ancient One slows down time as she's dying.
You have to return to your body now. You don't have time.
Time is relative. Your body hasn't even hit the floor yet. I've spent so many years peering through time, looking at this exact moment, but I can't see past it. I've prevented countless terrible futures, and after each one there's always another, and they all lead here, but never further.
You think this is where you die?
You wonder what I see in your future?
No. Yes?
I never saw your future, only its possibilities. You have such a capacity for goodness. You always excelled, but not because you craved success, but because of your fear of failure.
It's what made me a great doctor.
It's precisely what kept you from greatness. Arrogance and fear still keep you from learning the simplest and most significant lesson of all.
Which is?
It's not about you.
The showdown between Doctor Strange and Dormammu is awesome, in part because it demonstrates the importance of saving your game before you fight the final boss. Caecilius isn't a great villain, but Mads Mikkelsen's performance helps him not suck. The score is 4.5 out of 5. Number 9 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I fucking love this movie. I can definitely see why some people have it as their number 1. I just disagree. This movie does an outstanding job of creating a sense of dread. Cap gets more character development here than he did in the first Avenger and the Avengers combined. And now he's out of his element. In those two movies, it was a very clear setup, good versus evil, us versus them. Now, he doesn't know who the enemy is. He doesn't know who he can trust. He's out of his element. He's a fish out of water.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
Alexander Pierce and the Winter Soldier are two of the best villains in the MCU. The action is great, the music is dope, and the spy plot is very well done. The emotional moments work very well, and the film even manages to avoid having an egregious exposition dump by adding the ticking clock of an incoming missile while Zola is expositing. The score is 4.6 out of 5. Number 8 is Captain America: Civil War. I've preferred this movie over The Winter Soldier since it first came out, and I doubt that'll ever change. They're both great, though. This is a perfect example of how to do conflict between heroes. You force them to make a choice, a hard choice, and you push them so that they have to stick with it. So now they're against each other, and no one is willing to compromise. And the side that everyone picks is completely in character. And even Black Widow switching sides makes sense, because she has realized, I'm trying to do some good here, and I don't think Ross has our best interests at heart. Zemo is one of the best MCU villains, and his whole plan is one big expectation subversion. Pretty much the whole movie, we're set up to expect a final battle of Cap, Bucky, and maybe some of the others fighting their other Winter Soldiers. Instead, we get something much more personal and with much higher stakes. I fucking love it.
Tony.
Did you know?
I didn't know it was him.
Shouldn't. Avengers, did you know? Yes.
Score is 4.65 out of 5. Number 7, Spider-Man Far From Home. Much like Civil War, I consider this movie to be an improvement on its predecessor. A slight improvement. The cinematography and the directing are slightly better, the writing is just as good, and the villain is just as great, if not better. Jake Gyllenhaal really nails both sides of Mysterio. The rest of the main cast is great. Tom Holland and Zendaya have great chemistry. Their interactions are perfectly believably awkward.
I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, me too.
To see the city a little bit.
You know, they used to execute people on this bridge. They would, like, put them in a basket and they would drown in the water. Sorry.
It's okay. Look, there's this thing that I've been wanting to talk to you about for a while.
Yeah?
It's our last night in Europe, and I had this plan that I wanted to tell you. I'm just gonna tell you. MJ,
I'm Spider-Man.
What?
That's what you were gonna say, that you're Spider-Man.
No. I'm not Spider-Man.
I mean, I've been watching you for like a while now. It's kind of obvious.
Mysterio's illusions are visually stunning. The whole scene where he's tormenting Peter is just, love to hate it. Here's the main reason I love this movie. It's not a big blockbuster at heart. Much like its villain, it's pretending to be something bigger than it actually is. At its core, this is a cute little teen movie disguised as a big blockbuster, and it worked because it made like $1 billion. The score is 4.7 out of 5. Number 6 is Thor Ragnarok. I fucking love Taika Waititi. I cannot wait for Love and Thunder. This movie is visually stunning, well written, and fucking hilarious. Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, Kate Blanchett, Tessa Thompson, Mark Ruffalo, and Jeff Goldblum are all good, if not great. Doctor Strange's cameo is a highlight, and this movie is worth watching purely for the 40-ish seconds that he and Loki are on screen together. Hell, there are a ton of highlights. Luke Hemsworth, Matt Damon, and Sam Neill's cameos. He's a friend from work.
To get off this planet.
Hey, where are you going?
Hey! We know each other. He's a friend from work.
Valkyrie's flashback to fighting Hela. The list goes on. The score is 4.75 out of 5. Number 5 is Avengers Infinity War. Endgame might have had the biggest and best moments, but I think Infinity War is better as a whole. We get a villain protagonist, something no other movie has given us. That's right, make no mistake, this is Thanos' movie. Yes, he's the bad guy, but he's also the main character. The action, acting, musical score, and writing are all great.
Wakanda forever!
There are a few minor issues here and there, but they're exactly that. Minor. The score is 4.8 out of 5. Number 4 is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. This movie expanded on the MCU and it gave it some of its best action. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. This movie is a must-see for anyone mature enough to not throw a temper tantrum when they have to read subtitles. Full offense. Simu Liu, Tony Luang, Meng'er Zhang, Fala Chan, and Awkwafina are all great. The supporting cast is pretty good, and Michelle Yeoh stands out from the bunch. The leads are well fleshed out and they get plenty of development. The visuals are stunning and the different color palettes help each location stand out. The musical score is also pretty great. Where this movie really excels is the action. The cinematography and editing are great. What elevates the action is the choreography, which is fantastic. They use a variety of different martial arts and every character has their own distinct fighting style, and it's wonderful. That score is 4.85 out of 5. Number 3 is Spider-Man No Way Home. John Watts really stepped up his game for this movie. Takes everything the first 2 MCU Spider-Man movies did well, does them just as well if not better, and then also takes a bunch of other things and does them well too. I'm pretty sure that was grammatically correct. You don't have to have seen Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy or the Amazing Spider-Man movies to enjoy this movie, but it certainly helps. For all the things this movie succeeds at, the most important one is that it keeps things personal. Peter's actions and choices drive the plot. His inner conflict is directly connected to the external conflict, and that's why they both work.
Give me the box.
No.
The mirror dimension, where I'm in control.
Strange, stop! Can we please just talk about this?
Parker, don't you realize that in the multiverse there are an infinite number of people who know Peter Parker is Spider-Man? And if that spell gets loose, they're all coming here!
Look, I know, I get it, but we can't just send them home to die!
It's their fate. You can't change that any more than you can change who they are.
Whoa, what are you doing?
There's fan service for sure, but it never feels egregious. It is so satisfying to see all three Spider-Men here together. And even some of the villain interactions are fun. Like, yeah, Doc Ock and Norman Osborn knew each other before they both went nuts, or at least they knew of each other. My only complaint is that Eddie and Venom are basically relegated to a cameo, and all they really do is get drunk and then leave a little bit of Venom behind when they leave. The score is 4.9 out of 5. Number 2 is Iron Man. This movie set the bar really high for the rest of the franchise, let's be honest. This is Jon Favreau's masterpiece. It is a perfect example of how to take a character who should be a villain and turn him into a hero. This is one of the best superhero origin stories of all time.
اعتقد انك قتلناه.
Robert Downey Jr. is fantastic. Obadiah Stane isn't the best MCU villain, but he is great. The score is 4.95 out of 5. Finally, my number 1 is Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn is fucking awesome. Full stop. Okay, actually not full stop because I have more to say, but you get the point. Pretty much no one knew who these characters were before this movie, and now pretty much everyone does. The acting is great, the characters are fleshed out and they all get development. Ronan isn't a top tier villain, but he's still pretty great. The soundtrack and original musical score are both fantastic. The action is awesome. The humor is consistently hilarious. And every emotional moment works. Score is 5 out of 5. Hey everyone, what's your ranking? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe and all that. If you don't like the video, subscribe anyway so you can be alerted when I upload a new video and tell me how bad that one is too. And who knows, maybe you'll actually have some decent feedback for me. That's all for now. Stay safe in these crazy times.